Pick that up, sweetheart. That is what Dr. Caldwell said 90 minutes before the Pentagon shut down his entire operation. Cedar Creek Medical in Portland smells like antiseptic and stale coffee, fluorescent lights buzzing over scratched linoleum where Hannah Clarke mops the ER hallway at 05:30. Her Master Chief Petty Officer tattoo stays hidden beneath long sleeves as she empties bedpans with the same precision she once used to pack arterial wounds in Tikrit. She moves like furniture, invisible, competent, forgettable. In the supply closet, she inventories morphine vials while a pair of worn combat boots sits in her locker, wrapped in plastic, the leather still stained dark from desert sand. A slight tremor runs through her left hand when she touches them, the only crack in her composure. She has been here 6 weeks, assigned by Naval Intelligence to investigate insurance fraud targeting veteran patients at Cedar Creek. The operation is deep. The cover is airtight. Nobody knows she spent 18 years in the Navy Combat Medic Corps, or that she carried 237 soldiers off combat zones in the Anbar province alone, or that the boots in her locker belonged to a deaf Army Ranger from Tikrit named James Renner who she carried 3 miles through hell under fire to reach a medevac landing zone. All they know is that Hannah Clarke is a new nurse, quiet, competent, keeps her head down. Perfect. Down the hall, James Renner stares at the ceiling during his cardiology follow-up, and when Hannah delivers his medication tray at 08:15, he looks through her like glass. No recognition in his eyes despite her full name tattooed on his right forearm in faded black ink. Traumatic brain injury stole his memory 2 years ago. He does not know her anymore. She does not let her hand shake. Dr. Caldwell enters the nurse's station at 08:40, expensive watch catching the light, eyes already calculating as he notices Hannah's attention to a discrepancy in James Renner's billing codes. She had been reading the chart, just reading it, standing at the station with her coffee when she saw the error. Acute pericardial effusion noted in the attending notes but no follow-up ultrasound ordered. No cardiology consult documented despite the patient's known cardiac risk. The codes billed to insurance did not match the services rendered. She was trained to see patterns. Medical patterns. Fraud patterns. Everything. Dr. Caldwell watches her watching the chart, and something in his expression shifts. A recognition of threat. He is a man built for intimidation. 62 years old, commanding posture like a general who never left the battlefield, silver at his temples, hands that have never sutured anything but have signed authorization forms that made other people rich. The fraud ring operates through Cedar Creek like corruption through Wetwood, inflated billing codes, unnecessary procedures, targeted veteran patients who cannot advocate for themselves, insurance companies that do not question the paperwork because it comes from a hospital that looks legitimate. He has been running this operation for 4 years. He makes $400,000 annually. He employs 2 hospital administrators and 3 billing specialists in the conspiracy. He has never been questioned. He has never been threatened. Until now. Dr. Caldwell approaches the nurse's station at 09:10, moves with the fluid certainty of a man accustomed to dominating rooms. He sets down his coffee, black, no sugar, and leans against the counter where Hannah still stands with James Renner's chart in her hands. The other nurses scatter. They know what is coming. They have seen this before. She has been here 6 weeks, but they have been here longer, and they know the rules. New girl, Dr. Caldwell says. His voice sounds like a tank idling in a garage. Low. Threatening. Casual in a way that makes the actual threat worse. Hannah closes the chart. Dr. Caldwell. I have been thinking about your future here at Cedar Creek, he says. The sentence hangs in the air like a suspended weight. I am going to make a small wager with the staff. 10-to-1 odds you will not last more than 7 days in this department. Who wants to take that bet? Silence. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, and Hannah hears the sound of a stretcher being wheeled down the eastern corridor, the squeak of rubber wheels on linoleum. She does not respond. Does not defend herself. Does not argue. A jaw clench. That is all. She returns the chart to the rack. $500 says she quits by Friday, He continues, speaking to the room now, performing for the other nurses. She is competent, sure, but this job breaks people. Especially the quiet ones. You break silently, do not you? No drama. No warning. You just disappear. Hannah turns to walk back to the medication dispensary. She has 8 patients on her rounds, including James Renner, including an 84-year-old with congestive heart failure in bed 7, including a combat veteran with a below-knee amputation in bed 4 who keeps asking her where his unit is. She has work to do. She always has work to do. But Dr. Caldwell is not finished. He never is. He follows her into the break room, moves his body into the space between Hannah and the refrigerator. He is testing her. Hunting for a reaction. She can see it in how he holds himself, the slight lean forward, the pressure in his shoulders, the way his eyes track her hands. I saw you looking at Renner's chart, he says. You have a question about his care. No, Hannah says. Good. Because you do not have the experience to question anything yet. You are temporary. You are probationary. You are the kind of nurse hospitals use to fill schedules before they realize you cannot handle the pressure and move on. You understand. She does not answer. She does not need to. At 09:45, during the morning meal shift, Dr. Caldwell is in the cafeteria when Hannah enters to grab coffee before her next rounds. She has approximately 4 minutes before she needs to be back in the ER. She is thinking about James Renner's chart. Thinking about the pericardial effusion that was noted but not investigated. Thinking about the billing codes that do not align with the clinical documentation. Thinking about the fact that his condition could deteriorate rapidly if the cardiac inflammation worsens, and nobody is monitoring it because the monitoring is not profitable. Dr. Caldwell sees her in the line. He moves toward her with the deliberation of a predator approaching prey. He is holding his own tray, salad, grilled chicken, bottled water, the meal of a man who has learned to perform discipline. He positions himself directly beside her as she carries her tray toward the exit. She has her coffee in her right hand. Her tray is balanced in her left. She is thinking about the pericardiocentesis procedure, about how to properly drain an effusion if one develops, about the needle angle and the ultrasound guidance and the... Dr. Caldwell drops his entire tray onto hers. The collision is deliberate and violent. Coffee explodes across her white uniform jacket, steam rising off the scalded cotton. Her tray clatters to the floor with the tremendous sound of metal and ceramic shattering, the tray itself dents against the linoleum, her meal scattering across 6 feet of space. The room goes dead silent. 22 people. Every one of them stops moving. Every one of them watching. Oops, Dr. Caldwell says. He smiles. Clumsy me. Hannah does not move. Her jaw clamps shut so hard she tastes copper. The silence is so thick you could operate in it. She looks down at the mess, scattered food, broken ceramic, coffee soaking her scrubs, and for exactly 3 seconds, nobody in the room breathes. She can feel their eyes on her. She can feel them waiting for her to react, to break, to prove Dr. Caldwell right about the quiet ones disappearing. She bends down. Slowly. Deliberately. Her movements are surgical precision. She picks up the broken tray first, handling each piece with the same care she once used to pack instruments into a medical kit in a forward operating base. The other nurses do not help. They would not dare. Dr. Caldwell watches from above, arms crossed, satisfaction spreading across his face like a stain. You need help with that, another nurse whispers, but Hannah shakes her head once. She collects the shattered ceramic in her hands, careful, methodical, no hesitation. She picks up the scattered food with paper towels, wiping the linoleum with the efficiency of someone who has cleaned worse from concrete. Blood. Ash. Fuel residue. Sand. This is nothing. This is beneath notice. When the floor is clean, she stands up. She looks directly at Dr. Caldwell for exactly 2 seconds, just long enough for him to register that she is not crying, not trembling, not breaking. just long enough for him to understand that the performance failed. Then she turns and walks back to the supply closet to change her uniform jacket, and she does not miss her 4-minute deadline. She is back in the ER at 0950, moving from patient to patient with the same invisible competence as before. But that was not the worst part. At 10:15, during rounds, Hannah enters room for 12 where James Renner lies in the standard hospital bed, the rails up, his hands folded over the blanket. She has checked on him 3 times already this shift. She is checking on him now because she cannot help herself. Because seeing him hurts in a way she cannot articulate. Because every time she looks at his face, she remembers what he looked like in Tikrit, before the IED, before the traumatic brain injury took away everything except his body. He was a ranger. 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines. They called him Ghost because he could move through a city like smoke, could read terrain like a language, could keep 4 soldiers alive under fire for 16 hours while waiting for extraction. He was 28 years old. He had a wife in San Diego named Michelle and a daughter named Lily who was 4 at the time. He used to talk about the moment he would carry Lily on his shoulders while she threw popcorn at ducks in the park. Now he looks through Hannah like she is glass. She checks his vitals. Blood pressure 128/82. Heart rate 76. O2 saturation 98% on room air. He is stable. For now. She does not mention the chart discrepancy or the unbilled ultrasound or the pericardial effusion noted but not investigated. She does not tell him that his condition could spiral, that his heart could fill with fluid, that nobody at Cedar Creek Medical is monitoring it because the monitoring is not profitable. Instead, she says, your medication is on the tray. Pain management is at the call button if you need it. He does not respond. Does not nod. Does not recognize the voice of the woman who carried him 3 miles through hell. At 14:30, after her shift ends, Hannah sits in the supply closet with the fluorescent light off and the door closed. She is surrounded by stacked boxes of gauze, shelves of saline solution, the smell of sterile plastic and alcohol swabs. She sets a timer on her phone. 30 seconds. That is all she allows herself. 30 seconds to let her hands shake. 30 seconds to let the weight of what she is doing press down on her chest like an actual physical thing. 30 seconds to remember that James Renner will not remember her, that her mission is to document Dr. Caldwell's fraud ring before more veterans die from neglect, that she cannot afford to break or cry or show weakness because the operation requires her to be invisible. The timer reaches 30 seconds. It vibrates once in her palm. She stops shaking. She stands up. She straightens her uniform. She does not cry. She will not cry. The ones who have seen the worst often give the most, and Hannah Clarke has given everything, and she will give more because that is what soldiers do when they see their brothers forgotten. She opens the supply closet door and walks back into the fluorescent light of Cedar Creek Medical, her Master Chief Petty Officer tattoo still hidden beneath her long sleeves, her mission still unfolding, and Dr. Caldwell still completely unaware of who just picked up his discarded tray. The fluorescent light above the nurse's station flickers once, then steadies. Hannah pushes through the swinging doors at 6:24 a.m., her scrub still damp from the shower, her Master Chief Petty Officer tattoo hidden beneath long sleeves. She hasn't slept. Not after the supply closet. Not after hearing Caldwell's voice on the phone, asking someone to run a background check on her name. The morning rounds haven't started yet, but Dr. Caldwell has gathered 18 staff members at the central desk. Nurses, residents, LPNs, medical students. They cluster like a congregation waiting for a sermon. Hannah recognizes the setup immediately, the same tactical positioning she's seen in briefing rooms before operations. He's not gathering people to talk about patient care. He's performing. Listen up, Caldwell says, his voice carrying the kind of confidence that comes from knowing the room belongs to him. We've got a new nurse starting her rotation. Hannah Clarke. He points at her as she approaches the medication cart. I'm giving her 1 week. 5 days, actually. Anyone here want to take that bet? Laughter ripples across the station, soft, encouraging, the kind of laughter that says Caldwell has already won before the game started. Hannah's jaw clenches. Once. A pulse of tension that travels from her molars to her temples. Then it releases. She keeps her hand steady as she sorts the morning medications, each bottle aligned with surgical precision. Her eyes don't leave the cart. Around her, the staff members smile at each other. A new girl who won't last. A narrative that's already written. She's trained to recognize psychological operations. This is one. Low intensity. Designed to isolate. Designed to make her second-guess her competence in front of people whose respect she needs. Caldwell isn't raising his voice. He isn't being cruel, not technically. He's just stating a fact: she doesn't belong here, and everyone in this room knows it. But what Caldwell doesn't know is that Hannah Clarke has been surrounded by 30,000 Marines in the deserts of Tikrit, mortar fire shaking the ground beneath her boots, and still maintained her composure. One room full of hospital staff and their polite mockery isn't pressure. It's background noise. 2 days later, the cafeteria is crowded during lunch rush. The smell of industrial gravy and overcooked chicken fills the air. Hannah sits at a corner table, a cup of black coffee and a turkey sandwich in front of her, her eyes on the tablet where she's been reviewing patient files. Specifically, she's been reviewing the files that Caldwell's network has touched. She doesn't see him until it's too late to move. Caldwell walks past her table, his shoulder striking her tray with deliberate precision. The coffee explodes across the tile floor like a brown stain spreading across a map. Her sandwich slides under the chairs of the adjacent table. The plastic cup clatters and echoes. 20 staff members turn to watch. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, indifferent. Clumsy, Caldwell says, loud enough to carry across the entire cafeteria. Hannah's hands don't shake. This is the critical moment. The moment where she could stand up, could defend herself, could make a scene that would validate everyone's suspicion that she's unstable, emotional, not cut out for nursing. Instead, she stays seated for exactly 2 seconds. Then she rises, and she bends down, and she begins picking up each piece of trash and each drop of coffee-soaked tile, methodically, with the kind of precision that comes from field medicine. From triage under fire. From understanding that panic is a luxury soldiers cannot afford. She returns to her shift without a word. The next afternoon, Caldwell finds her in the hallway outside James Renner's room. She's been checking on him every hour, monitoring his breathing, watching the slight discoloration in his fingertips that suggests his circulation is compromised. The doctors have barely looked at him since he arrived. His chart sits on the counter, incomplete, waiting for assessments that never come. Caldwell walks past, then stops. He turns around. And he throws the patient chart at her feet. The papers scatter across the floor like confetti, spreading across the tile in a chaos of medical notation and diagnostic failures. Hannah watches them fall. Around her, 3 other staff members freeze, pretending not to notice. "Pick that up, sweetheart," Caldwell says, his voice smooth as oil. "Since you're so interested in files that aren't your concern." Hannah's jaw clenches. She can feel the tremor starting in her left hand, the residual adrenaline from 1,000 combat moments when someone spoke to her this way and she was forced to maintain discipline, forced to remember that the mission came before her ego. That the patient came before her pride. She kneels down. She collects every sheet in order. The edges of some papers are bent. She straightens them with her fingers. She counts them, 17 pages, and makes sure they're in sequence. Then she staples them back together, her movements precise and methodical, and she hands the chart back to him. "Yes, doctor," she says, her voice flat as concrete, her eyes avoiding his. He leans close. She can smell his cologne now, something expensive and aggressive, something that smells like money spent on the wrong things. His breath carries the scent of the expensive coffee he drinks in his private office while completing falsified medical assessments. "You're watching him pretty closely," he says, gesturing toward James Renner's room. "The deaf guy. That's some kind of charity project for you." Hannah's left hand tremors slightly, a whisper of movement against her scrub pants. She knows exactly what he's doing. He's testing her. Trying to provoke a reaction. Trying to confirm his own suspicion that something is wrong with her, that she's unbalanced, that he was right to make his public bet. She doesn't give him anything. Instead, she stands, straightens her scrubs, and continues down the hallway to the medication dispensary. She hears him laugh behind her, satisfied with himself. He's won another round. Or he thinks he has. That night, alone in the supply closet during inventory, Hannah allows herself 30 seconds. She presses her forehead against the cold metal shelving. The shelf is smooth, almost surgical in its precision, cold enough to shock her system into clarity. Her fingers dig into the edge. She breathes, in through her nose, out through her mouth, and she forces the tremor to stop. The surge of adrenaline, the rage that wants to pour out of her, the humiliation that wants to crack her composure, she locks all of it down into a compartment deep in her chest where it belongs. The fluorescent light flickers above her. Through the door, she hears voices in the hallway outside. 2 of them. Caldwell and someone else. A hospital administrator, maybe. Or an investigator. She holds still, listening. I need you to run a background check on Clarke, Hannah, Caldwell is saying into his phone, his voice casual, conversational. Full workup. Nursing school verification, employment history, references. Something's off about her. She's too interested in files that aren't hers. And she's watching the deaf ranger patient like she knows him or something. A pause. Hannah imagines the response on the other end of the line. No, I don't think she's a threat yet, Caldwell continues. But I like to know who's working in my department. Call it professional due diligence. He hangs up. His footsteps retreat down the hallway. Hannah is alone in the supply closet again. But now everything has changed. The background check means he's concerned. Concerned enough to investigate. Concerned enough to call someone with connections. And that means her time is running out faster than she calculated. She opens the supply closet door and walks back into the fluorescent light of Cedar Creek Medical, her Master Chief Petty Officer tattoo still hidden beneath her long sleeves, her mission still unfolding, and Dr. Caldwell still completely unaware of the magnitude of what is invited into his hospital. Over the next 24 hours, Hannah begins to understand the full scope of what she's been sent to document. She's supposed to be documenting Caldwell's insurance fraud scheme, the inflated billing codes, the unnecessary procedures, the false diagnoses. But as she reviews the patient files late at night on her tablet, using the security clearance she was issued 3 months ago by Naval Intelligence, she begins to see a pattern that's far darker than simple greed. The fraud has a specific target. Veteran patients. 17 of them in the past 9 months. All of them with some combination of service-related trauma, hearing loss, traumatic brain injury, PTSD, physical disabilities that make communication with medical staff difficult. All of them receiving incomplete diagnostic workups from Caldwell's network of complicit physicians. All of them being billed for services they never received or conditions that were never actually assessed. James Renner is patient number 18. Hannah's hands move across the tablet screen, pulling files, cross-referencing timestamps, building the evidence matrix that she's supposed to be building. But the mission briefing she received 3 months ago becomes vivid again in her mind. Naval Intelligence suspected a fraud ring targeting veteran patients specifically because of their vulnerability. Because they're easier to bill. Because they're less likely to challenge the medical system. Because they're already broken in ways that make additional medical neglect almost invisible. Caldwell isn't just committing fraud. He's predating on the people Hannah spent her entire career protecting. And James Renner, the man whose name is tattooed on her forearm, the man she carried 3 miles through the streets of Tikrit with gunfire erupting around them both, the man whose life she traded her own safety for on an October afternoon that still wakes her up at 3 a.m., is lying in a hospital bed upstairs with his heart slowly failing, waiting for someone to notice that he's dying. Hannah sets the tablet down on the supply shelf and allows herself exactly one breath where everything she's been holding back threatens to break through. The rage. The betrayal. The knowledge that she's been watching him suffer while maintaining her cover, unable to help him, unable to reveal herself, unable to do anything except document the crimes being committed against him. Then she breathes out, and the moment passes. The mission comes first. It always does. But now the mission has changed. It's not about documentation anymore. It's about survival. Because if Caldwell's background check on her comes back incomplete, if there's a gap somewhere in the cover story that naval intelligence constructed, if someone asks the wrong questions at the wrong moment, everything falls apart. And if everything falls apart before she has enough evidence, the fraud ring walks free. And James Renner becomes just another statistic. Hannah walks out of the supply closet and returns to the medication cart. She checks the clock, 11:08 p.m. Her shift ends in 13 minutes. In that time, she needs to document 3 more billing anomalies from Caldwell's files. She needs to photograph the diagnostic gaps in James Renner's latest assessment. And she needs to ensure that when Caldwell's investigator calls back with the results of her background check, there are no answers that will satisfy him, just enough verified information to make the cover seem real, just enough gaps to make him continue to doubt, just enough uncertainty to keep him investigating her instead of discovering that naval intelligence has already discovered him. But that wasn't the worst part of what was coming. The worst part was that in 4 shifts, James Renner was going to collapse with a cardiac emergency that 12 doctors would refuse to treat. And Hannah Clarke was going to be the only one standing between him and death. And she was going to have to choose between her mission and his life. She just didn't know it yet. The crash cart sat halfway restocked when the hallway changed. Hannah felt it before she heard it, that shift in air pressure that happens when someone is drowning upright. She turned. James Renner stood 40 feet away, one hand pressed against the wall, the other clutching his chest like he was trying to hold something inside that was trying to escape. His lips were blue. Hannah moved without thinking. The 4 bags fell from her hands. The monitor cable scattered across the floor. Her body already knew what her eyes were confirming: cardiac tamponade. The heart suffocating under pressure. Fluid where there should be only air. A death sentence with maybe 10 minutes on the clock. She crossed the distance in 4 seconds. James's eyes found hers, confused, terrified, the color draining from his face like someone had pulled a drain plug. His mouth moved. No sound came out. His hearing was already gone. Now his heart was following. James! Look at me! She didn't need him to hear her. She needed him to focus. Sit down. Right here. Now. He dropped. His back hit the wall with the sound of a dropped duffel bag. Hannah knelt, hands already moving, already assessing. Skin mottled. Breathing shallow and rapid. Distended neck veins rising like tributaries from his throat. The signs were written in his body like a confession. Fluid had accumulated in the pericardial sac, the membrane surrounding his heart. Every heartbeat was happening inside a locked box. Pressure rising. Cardiac output failing. Time running out. Someone page cardiology. Her voice was steady. Different from the Hannah they knew. Now. A resident froze 15 feet away, tablet in hand, staring. Now. The resident moved. Hannah's fingers found James's pulse. It was there, then it wasn't, then it was there again, threadbare, chaotic, the electrical system of his heart misfiring as the organ collapsed under its own pressure. His blood pressure was crashing. His oxygen saturation was following. The monitor in the nurse's station would be screaming now. Someone would be listening. Or someone wouldn't. Dr. Patterson was cardiology. He appeared in the hallway exactly 80 seconds later, white coat crisp, expression already shaped into refusal before he even saw the patient. What is this? Patterson's eyes moved across James's body with the detachment of someone reading a menu. Then they found the deaf patient's face, and something shifted in his features, a micro-expression that Hannah had learned to read over for shifts of this hospital. It was the expression of a man calculating liability. Cardiac tamponade. Fluid in the pericardial sac. He needs immediate drainage or he codes. Hannah's words were clipped. Information. Not a request. Patterson stepped backward. Actually stepped backward. He's deaf? Yes. Communication is going to be an issue. I can communicate. Hannah's jaw was steady. Her hand stayed on James. He needs pericardiocentesis. Now. Patterson shook his head. Once. Final. That's a high liability procedure on an unstable patient with communication challenges. I'm not comfortable with the risk profile. He turned to walk away. He actually turned to walk away. Hannah didn't move. Didn't call after him. Didn't beg. She just watched him go and made a note of his name in the part of her brain that never forgot anything. Dr. Reeves appeared 3 minutes later because the page had cascaded. Reeves was thoracic. Young. Ambitious. Terrified. James's lips were darker now. His breathing was mechanical, desperate. His body was trying to pump blood through a prison of its own making. Reeves looked at James. He looked at Hannah. He looked at the monitor showing an oxygen saturation that had dropped to 64%. This isn't my specialty, Reeves said. Cardiology is refusing. Then they have their reasons. He left. Dr. Hammond came next. Then Chen. Then Michaels. Dr. Garrett after that. They all came. They all looked. They all left. Some took 30 seconds. Some took less. The excuses varied, but underneath them all was the same calculation: the deaf veteran in the hallway was not worth the insurance implications, the liability questions, the potential lawsuits. 6 doctors. All from different services. All reaching the same conclusion through paths that never crossed. Hannah was still on the floor next to James when the second wave arrived. These were the ones who didn't even appear in person. Dr. Vasquez was paged and called back saying he was with another patient and couldn't break away. Dr. Tran said via phone that she needed written orders before approaching a procedural case. Dr. Okonkwo texted his response through the residence, a distance of 18 feet that might as well have been an ocean. All covering for Caldwell's deliberately incomplete diagnostic work. All protecting the network. All choosing the path of least resistance. That was 9 doctors. Dr. Sinclair walked past. Didn't respond to the page. Just kept walking. Deliberately kept walking. Hannah watched him turn the corner and disappear. 10. Someone called Dr. Hollis from interventional radiology. He appeared, took one look at the situation, and said, "This is an ER problem, not a radiology problem," and left. 11. There was a moment, exactly one moment, where Hannah looked at James's face and saw the moment his brain realized what was happening. He was drowning in his own chest cavity. He was surrounded by people in white coats. And nobody was coming. 12 doctors. The last was Dr. Morrison, a hospitalist who'd been on call upstairs. He stood in front of James for 7 full seconds, reading the vital signs, reading the labored breathing, reading the blue lips, and then he said to Hannah, "Get him to the ICU. Let them handle it," and walked away. The hallway was empty. The monitor was screaming. James's oxygen sat was 60% and dropping. His heart rate was 142 and destabilizing. His blood pressure was 74/48. The math was simple: he had maybe 5 minutes before his heart stopped entirely. Maybe 4. Hannah stood. "I'm going on break," she said quietly to no one who would hear her. "I'm going to get a spinal needle and an ultrasound machine. And then I'm going to do what those 12 doctors should have done for minutes ago." She didn't ask permission. There was no one left to ask. She moved through the hospital like she was following a map written in her own muscle memory, the kind of memory that came from 100 combat saves in the chaos of Tikrit, where you didn't wait for authorization, you acted. The crash cart had ultrasound equipment. The procedure tray was in the trauma bay. A 22-gauge spinal needle was available in the supply room. She gathered the equipment in 90 seconds, moving like someone who had nothing left to lose. The needle gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The ultrasound machine hummed as she wheeled it back to James. He was conscious still. Barely. His eyes tracked hers, and for one moment she saw something in them, recognition maybe, or just the animal intelligence that comes from being very close to death. Hannah knelt beside him. She positioned the ultrasound probe just below his left rib cage, finding the fourth intercostal space with the precision of muscle memory, and there it was on the screen, the dark fluid surrounding his heart like a suffocating blanket. The effusion. 200 cubic centimeters of it, maybe more, pressing against the cardiac ventricles, restricting their expansion. Every beat of his heart was happening in slow motion, against impossible pressure. "Someone document," she said, and this time her voice didn't request. It commanded. A first-year resident fumbled for a tablet, hands shaking. Hannah marked the insertion site with her index finger, the exact space between ribs where the needle would go, where it would pass through muscle and membrane and find the fluid-filled sac beyond. She opened the sterile tray. She drew up saline. The needle felt light in her hand. Familiar. Like coming home. She advanced the needle through the chest wall, watching the ultrasound screen the way she'd watched video feeds of approaching helicopters, the way she'd watched muzzle flashes in alleyways. The needle moved with intention. Through the intercostal muscles. Through the parietal pleura. Into the pericardial space. And then, the give. The resistance ending. The needle entering the fluid-filled sac around his failing heart. She withdrew the plunger. Dark fluid filled the syringe. 20 cubic centimeters. 30. James's shoulders sagged. His breathing deepened slightly. His color started returning, pink spreading across his skin like sunrise breaking through fog. 40 cubic centimeters. 50. The pressure releasing. The heart beginning to work again. The ambulance siren sound of the monitor began to stabilize, the rhythm becoming more regular, the electrical signals finding their way back to something resembling normal. She withdrew exactly 200 cubic centimeters. Stopped. Removed the needle. Applied direct pressure to the insertion site. The whole procedure took 4 minutes and 37 seconds. James's eyes fluttered open. They focused on her face. For 1 second, just 1 second, he looked like he was trying to remember something. Like there was a ghost in his memory reaching for her hand. Then it was gone. The moment passed. The blank look returned. He didn't know her. He would never know her. But he was breathing. His oxygen saturation was climbing, 68, 74, 82, 88. His heart rate was normalizing. His blood pressure was stabilizing. He was alive because she had moved, and 12 doctors had not. Within 15 minutes, Hannah had finished charting the procedure and was walking toward the break room when she heard Dr. Caldwell's voice carrying from the administrator's office down the hall, his tone calm and concerned, talking about serious questions regarding her credentials and scope of practice. She didn't stop walking. She had already begun calculating how many months she would need before the evidence against him was complete, and what it would cost her to stay in this place long enough to finish what she started. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A message from her handler: cover may be blown. Extraction available. Confirm. She didn't confirm. She sat in the break room for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, the same time it had taken her to save James Renner's life. Then she went back to work. Her hands moved like they followed a script written in Tikrit. Muscle memory. 23 years of field medicine compressed into fingers that no longer asked permission. The spinal needle gleamed under the fluorescent lights, 20 gauge, sterile, and she threaded it through the cellophane wrapper without hesitation. The ultrasound wand was already in her left hand. She'd positioned it against James Renner's chest cavity before the last of the 12 doctors had stopped walking away. 12. She'd counted them. 6 claimed he wasn't worth the liability. 4 were covering for Caldwell's deliberately incomplete diagnostics. 2 simply didn't answer their pages. The needle went in at the 5th intercostal space, perpendicular to his sternum, and she watched the screen as the needle shaft approached the fluid collection surrounding his heart. The pericardium was distended like a water balloon stretched past breaking. 220 milliliters of fluid compressing his cardiac chambers, strangling his oxygen supply. The residents watched with faces gone pale. None of them had ever seen a nurse move with this kind of precision. None of them had ever seen someone save a life with a needle meant for spinal taps. The fluid came back dark, almost maroon, indicating blood. Hemopericardium. His own blood was drowning him. Hannah drew slowly, deliberately, watching the ultrasound as the pressure released with each withdrawal. 20 cc 40 cc. The monitor showed his blood pressure creeping up from 60 over 40. 60 cc. The heart rhythm on the monitor shifted, steadied. 80 cc. His oxygen saturation climbed from 68 to 71 to 76. The needle was a tube now, a lifeline, and she was the only person in the entire corridor with the knowledge and training to see what needed doing and do it. 100 cc. His wife's name was still tattooed on his forearm. She'd seen it during triage. 140 cc. The color of the fluid changed as she drew, darker now, transitioning to lighter, indicating she was past the worst of the clot. 180 cc. His pressure was 94 over 58. His O2 sat 84. The monitor showed normal sinus rhythm returning, that beautiful electrical signature of a heart that remembered how to work. 200 cc. She withdrew the needle and her hands were absolutely steady as she applied pressure with a trauma dressing, taped it down, checked his pulse. Present. Strong. The artery hammering against her fingertips like it had been given a second chance and knew it. She stepped back. Exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds had elapsed since she began. The same amount of time it would have taken a cardiologist to arrive from the ICU, if any cardiologist had answered a page. James Renner's eyes were still closed, but his breathing was deeper now, the ventilator working with him instead of against him. The residents were staring at her like she'd just performed a miracle in front of them instead of basic combat medicine, the kind of procedure you learned in your first week at forward operating base Shank when half your company was dealing with trauma and the waiting list for a surgeon was measured in hours instead of minutes. One of the residents, a woman named Chen, whispered, "How did you know to do that?" Hannah didn't answer. She was already turning toward the break room when Dr. Caldwell appeared at the far end of the corridor, his face the color of old concrete. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching her walk toward him, and then he turned and walked the opposite direction, pulling his phone from his pocket before he'd even rounded the corner. She'd seen that motion before. In Tikrit. When you'd made an enemy with power and nowhere left to hide. She sat in the break room for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, the same time it had taken her to save James Renner's life, and then she went back to work. But the call came at 2:14 p.m., 14 minutes after she'd finished her shift documentation. Hannah was still in the locker room when her supervisor, a woman named Margaret who'd never said more than 10 words to her, appeared at the door with that particular expression people wore when they'd been given orders they didn't like. "You need to come with me," Margaret said quietly. Hannah followed. The administrative office was on the 3rd floor, the kind of place where budgets and disciplinary actions were handled in conference rooms with wood paneling that looked like it had been installed in 1987. A man Hannah had never seen before was sitting at the table, mid-50s, pressed suit, notepad open in front of him. His name was Morris. He was an investigator. Caldwell had already called him. The story Caldwell had told him was simple: a new nurse on her 4th shift had performed a major surgical procedure without proper credentials, without physician oversight, and without authorization. It was dangerous. It was reckless. It was a clear violation of scope of practice laws in the state of Oregon. Morris slid a suspension letter across the table. Effective immediately. Hannah Clarke was no longer permitted to work at Cedar Creek Medical pending a full investigation into her credentials and training. Margaret looked at her like she wanted to apologize but didn't know how. Hannah read the letter once. Single flowing narrative. No hesitation in her eyes, no tremor in her hands. She set the paper down on the table and said, "You'll want to contact my references." Morris looked up. "Already did. Westfield Memorial has no record of you. Neither does Providence Health. Your transcript from Oregon Health Sciences University doesn't match the name on your driver's license. Everything checks out on the surface, but something's off. I've seen nurses with credential issues before. This doesn't feel right." Hannah didn't respond. She stood up from the chair and walked out of the office while Morris was still speaking. Margaret tried to call after her, but Hannah was already moving, and there was no point in explaining that the references Caldwell had called were part of a naval intelligence cover identity that went for layers deep, that her transcript did exist but not under the name she'd been hired under, that every thread Morris pulled would unravel in ways that would eventually loop back to people with security clearances and classified portfolios. She drove to the east side of Portland in the dark, the kind of neighborhood where the streetlights were half burned out and the storefronts had bars on the windows. There was a diner on Morrison Street that had been open for 32 years without ever being renovated. The fluorescent lights buzzed above cracked vinyl booths. The coffee came in a white ceramic mug that looked like it had survived the Cold War. She sat in the corner booth at 3:17 a.m. and ordered coffee she didn't drink. The window beside her was black, and her reflection stared back from the glass like a stranger. Just a woman in scrubs, no rank visible, no scars that told the story of Tikrit, no calluses that would match the name on her wrists. The waitress, a woman named Dolores with grey roots and a tired smile, refilled the mug without asking. Hannah didn't touch it. She was calculating. Caldwell's billing fraud had targeted 67 veteran patients in the last 6 months. Each inflated bill averaged $34,000. That was $2,278,000 in fraudulent charges. But the money wasn't the point. The money was just the byproduct. The point was that Caldwell had flagged certain veteran patients as low-risk targets, denied them proper diagnostic imaging to keep costs down, then used their emergencies as billing opportunities when they collapsed. 3 of those patients had died because their conditions went untreated. 3 of them had permanent neurological damage. 61 of them were still at Cedar Creek, still vulnerable, and if Hannah was suspended, if her undercover investigation shut down before she'd gathered the final evidence, then Caldwell's network would continue undisturbed. The network of board members who received kickbacks. The network of radiologists who rubber-stamped incomplete diagnostics. The network of financial administrators who coded the bills into untraceable accounts. She calculated the other math. If she was exposed as naval intelligence, if Morris ran her fingerprints through the military databases, and he would, because that was what good investigators did, then her cover evaporated. 6 months of documentation would become inadmissible in court. The photographs of kickback payments, the recorded phone conversations with board members, the audit trail of falsified claims, all of it would be tainted by the revelation that she'd been a plant the entire time. Defense attorneys would tear it apart. Caldwell would walk. And 67 veteran patients would watch a federal investigation collapse because a woman with a tattoo on her wrist had made the choice to save one of them. The fluorescent lights hummed above her head like angry insects. At 3:38 a.m., she made a decision that would burn every card she had left to play. She pulled out her phone and texted her handler, for words, eyes only, maintaining cover. Will not extract. Then she finished her coffee, left exact change on the table, and drove back to Cedar Creek Medical. The parking lot was still dark. The rain had started again, the kind of rain that came off the Columbia River with a smell like wet concrete and diesel exhaust. She parked in the employee lot and walked straight to the security desk. Patterson, the guard from Tikrit, though he didn't know she remembered his name tag from her first day, didn't know she'd recognized him from a convoy escort in Fallujah, looked up from his desk. "They said you were suspended," he said. "I am," Hannah said. I need you to call the investigator, Morris. Tell him I'm in the building. Tell him I'm ready for my fingerprint background check. Patterson didn't ask why. He just made the call. Morris arrived at 7:14 a.m. with the morning shift, wet from the rain, carrying an ink pad and a fingerprint card. Hannah sat in the security office and let him press each finger into the dark ink, one at a time, rolling them across the card with professional precision. Thumb first. Index. Middle. Ring. Pinky. Then the rolling of all 4 fingers together. The ink was cold against her skin and smelled like iron and petroleum. This is routine, Morris said, though both of them knew it wasn't. Once I run these through the system, we'll know if there's anything that doesn't match your application materials. Hannah didn't respond. She knew exactly what would happen when Morris ran her prints through the FBI database, the military personnel databases, the classified systems that existed 3 layers deeper than civilian law enforcement could reach. Her fingerprints would light up like Christmas. Master Chief Petty Officer Hannah Clarke. Active clearance. Naval intelligence. On assignment. Not missing. Not fraudulent. Real. She was counting on the military databases to reach out to the civilian investigators the same way a drowning person reaches for an extended hand. She was counting on the fact that the truth, when it finally came, would be loud enough to protect the mission even as it destroyed her cover. The card was filled now, each fingerprint a small dark eclipse against the white space. Morris sealed it in an evidence bag and nodded. 3 to 5 hours. I'll have results by noon. He left. Hannah sat in the security office and waited. She didn't go home. She didn't try to sleep. She sat in the waiting area of Cedar Creek Medical in her civilian clothes, watching the morning shift arrive, watching the orderlies push stretchers, watching the world continue as if a woman with a Navy cross hidden under her skin and a name tattooed on a dead ranger's arm wasn't sitting in a plastic chair calculating how many people would die if the next 3 hours went wrong. The fluorescent lights hummed. A television in the corner showed morning news. Stock markets and weather and a 3-car accident on I-405. At 10:43 a.m., Morris called from his office. Ms. Clarke, I need you to come to my temporary workspace. We need to discuss your background check. She stood. She walked. She was absolutely steady on her feet. The television in the Cedar Creek Medical lobby switched channels at 3:12 in the afternoon, cutting from a cooking show to breaking news. The anchor's voice carried across the waiting area, clinical and sharp. We're following a developing story out of Portland, Oregon. Naval Intelligence has just released a statement regarding a missing decorated combat medic whose identity was uncovered 3 hours ago during a routine fingerprint screening at a local hospital. Hannah's photograph filled the screen. Her name appeared below it in yellow text, missing decorated combat medic found. The investigator Morris stood in the radiology hallway holding the federal database printout. His hands had stopped shaking 5 minutes ago, replaced by the cold clarity of a man who understood he'd walked into something far beyond his scope. The fingerprints he'd lifted from Hannah Clarke's right hand had flagged an automated alert in the Navy's classified personnel system. His standard NCIC check had escalated automatically to NCIS, then to Naval Intelligence. Within 90 minutes, his phone had rung with a voice identifying itself as a Pentagon liaison. The message was precise: cease investigation immediately, preserve all evidence, cooperate fully with incoming military personnel. He had been hired to destroy her. Instead, he'd opened a door that was now exploding outward in ways he couldn't control. The conference room on the 3rd floor of Cedar Creek Medical became an impromptu war room. A Navy captain in dress white stood at the head of the table, his uniform ribbons catching the fluorescent light like medals in a museum display. Beside him sat a 2-star general with a file folder thick enough to contain a life. 3 FBI agents occupied the back wall. Morris had been instructed to join them. The captain's eyes found Hannah standing near the door, still wearing her scrubs, still dressed as the nurse everyone had assumed was a temporary hire. Nightingale 6, the captain said. Not a greeting. A recognition. A calling home. The security guard Mitchell, who'd been stationed at the Cedar Creek entrance for 11 years, stood and saluted. His voice came out thick. "That's Master Chief Petty Officer Clarke. I served with her in Tikrit. Sanjan Valley Operations, 2014. He didn't sit back down. He remained standing, his posture shifting from slouched hospital security to something with spine and steel in it. I carried her medical kit during the Fallujah sweep. She saved 3 of my squad mates that day. 3 men who were supposed to die." The general opened the file. His voice had the texture of authority worn smooth by decades of command. According to her record, Master Chief Clarke completed 17 documented combat saves over 3 deployments. 2 Navy Crosses. Bronze Star with Valor. 3 Purple Hearts. He paused between each line, letting each piece of Hannah's hidden identity settle into the room like stones into still water. Her call sign was Nightingale 6 because she could heal anything that still had a heartbeat. James Renner walked through the door. The conference room went absolutely quiet. He moved without hesitation, the way a man moves when he knows exactly where he's going. His eyes had clarity in them that hadn't existed 2 days ago, as if the pericardiocentesis Hannah had performed had drained something more than fluid from his chest. He stepped directly to Hannah and lifted his sleeve. The tattoo ran the length of his forearm in military script. Her name. Below it, in smaller letters, "She carried me 3 miles through hell." His hand was trembling, but his jaw was steady. He signed something toward Patterson, who now stood at the room's edge in his full hospital security uniform, no longer the guard in the background. Patterson's voice, when it came, cracked slightly. "He says he spent 2 years not remembering your face. But his arm never forgot your name." The silence lasted exactly 10 full seconds. Someone's phone buzzed. No one answered it. The hospital board president, a man named Harrison whose signature had authorized the kickback schemes, looked from the general to the captain to Hannah, then at the file spread across the conference table. His face had gone the color of old paper. "We need to see Dr. Caldwell's files," he said quietly. "All of them." The general had already anticipated this. He slid a laptop across the conference table toward the hospital's IT director. On the screen scrolled 6 months of documentation. Every inflated billing code that Hannah had photographed from Caldwell's office computer during inventory shifts. Every falsified diagnostic report submitted for James Renner and 66 other veteran patients. Every kickback payment, every falsified authorization, every single fraudulent claim cross-referenced and time-stamped. $2.3 million in false billings, each one targeting the most vulnerable patients in Cedar Creek's system. The pattern was deliberate. Veterans with TBI. Deaf patients. Low-income patients without family advocates. Patients who couldn't fight back. The fraud had been surgical. Systematic. Profitable. Morris stepped forward with the evidence bag containing the billing administrator's personal laptop, seized from her desk before she'd realized what was happening. "The investigator you hired," Morris said, looking at Harrison, "was already working for Naval Intelligence. You hired me to destroy her cover. Instead, I exposed your entire operation." Dr. Caldwell tried to enter the conference room. The captain closed the door. From behind the glass, through the narrow window, Hannah watched his mouth move. Watched him gesture. Watched him attempt to explain, to contextualize, to minimize. The words didn't matter. His network was already fragmenting in real time. Harrison was on his phone calling his attorney. The other board members who'd signed off on the kickback scheme were backing away from Caldwell like he carried something contagious. The hospital's legal counsel had already begun sealing his office. 2 FBI agents were walking toward him with a federal warrant. Within 4 hours, Caldwell's medical license was suspended pending investigation. By evening, the Oregon Medical Board had opened a formal inquiry. His network didn't collapse, it vaporized. Harrison resigned from the board by 6 p.m. 2 other board members were lawyered up by nightfall. The billing administrator who'd processed the false claims was in federal custody before the dinner shift changed over. By midnight, Caldwell's attorney had advised him not to speak to anyone about anything, ever. The phone he'd used to activate his network against Hannah now sat silent in his Mercedes in the hospital parking lot, where he sat in the darkness watching FBI agents carry boxes from his office. The weapons he'd built, the investigation, the pressure, the network, the fabricated accusations, had turned inside out. They hadn't destroyed Hannah Clarke. They destroyed him. Hannah watched from the third-floor window as the last box was loaded into a federal vehicle. James Renner stood beside her, the way he'd been standing beside her for the past 2 hours. His hand rested on her shoulder with the weight of 2 years of missing memories suddenly recovered. He signed something toward Patterson, who stood at the window as well, finally allowing the military identity under the security guard uniform to breathe. Patterson translated, "You saved me twice now." Hannah nodded once, her eyes still on the parking lot below where Caldwell sat alone in his car, understanding that his entire world had just ended. 2 years later, Hannah drove past a strip mall in southeast Portland. She saw the folding table under a portable canopy. Dr. Caldwell sat behind it in a suit that had probably cost $200, spinning a rack of supplemental insurance brochures with the deliberate slowness of a man with no other options. A handwritten sign read, "Affordable coverage, ask me how." His medical license was permanently revoked. The fraud investigation had recovered $2.3 million in false billings. 3 of his board allies faced federal charges. Harrison had served 18 months at federal prison Camp Alderson. She parked across the street. The Veterans Medical Ethics Division office occupied the 3rd floor of a converted courthouse building. The position had been established by Pentagon appropriation after Hannah's case became a Senate hearing. Her title was director. Her annual budget was $4.2 million. Her team included 17 veterans, each one hired specifically because they'd survived the systems that were supposed to protect them. On the shelf behind her desk, between framed commendation plaques and policy binders thick as dictionaries, sat James Renner's worn combat boots from Tikrit. The leather was still stained dark from where his blood had soaked through during those 3 miles of desert. He donated them during the office opening ceremony, signing that they belonged here, in this place, in the hands of the woman who kept people from falling through the cracks. James worked part-time as a patient advocate now, his TBI almost entirely recovered, his voice relearned, his life constructed around helping other veterans navigate the same systems that had almost killed him. Hannah picked up the phone to review her next case, a woman in Sacramento whose hospital had tried to refuse treatment due to her disability status. Before she dialed, she touched the boots once, a ritual performed every workday for 2 years. A small contact. A reminder. Her first combat instructor had told her something she'd carried through 3 deployments, the ones who have seen the worst often give the most. She looked out the window at the strip mall across the street, where Dr. Caldwell continued his slow rotation of insurance brochures, and then back at the boots on her shelf. She dialed the number. Someone answered. Hannah began to speak. Subscribe to see more stories of heroes hidden in plain sight. Like this video if you've ever been underestimated by someone who didn't know your true value. Comment below, have you ever watched justice happen in real time?